Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Fallen Flags of America. I am your host, L&M Productions, and today we will be talking about a very exciting topic in the railroad preservation industry currently happening. So, for those who are unaware, um, today we will be talking about New York Central 3001, which is the only surviving New York Central L3A Mohawk type. On October 9th, the Fort Wayne Railroad Technical and Historical Society, or just Fort Wayne RHS, announced on October 9th that it had acquired New York Central 482 3001 and will be working towards an eventual return to operation. Elkhart, Indiana. The Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society announced Wednesday that it had acquired New York Central L3A Mohawk 3001 and planned to restore the 484 locomotive to operate for use on its popular Rail Indiana Experience excursions. The 3001 is the largest surviving New York Central steam locomotive and the only member of the L3A class to escape the scrapper's torch. The locomotive was under the care of the city of Elkhart, Indiana, and has been on display at the National New York Central Museum for several decades. The oldest photos I can find of it on display at the museum date back to around the mid 80s. The FWRS owns three other steam locomotives, most notably Nickel Plate Road 284 Berkshire 765, which it has operated since the 1970s. For the last few years, it has managed the Indiana Rail Experience, an excursion operation on the Indiana Northeastern Railroad, which has trackage in Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. Much of that trackage is former New York Central, meaning that locomotive 3001 will be right on home rails. New York Central 3001 will also join the fleet of seven Bud Streamline cars built in 1941 for the New York Central's Empire State Express and purchased from the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum in 2023. While the FWRHS made the announcement on Wednesday, the effort to acquire the locomotive dates back more than a year. The city of Elkhart approved the sale of 3001 in September 2023. Although the transaction was noted in publicly available documents, it was never widely shared. The deal includes 3001, its tender, plus an auxiliary tender. In return for the locomotive, the National New York Central Museum will receive a cash donation of $20,000. The city of Elkhart will receive help with creating a strategic plan for the future of the museum and its equipment, and the promise that when restored, the FWRHS will do its best to bring 3001 back to Elkhart for a visit, although the deal notes that is entirely dependent on the engine being allowed to operate on Class 1 rails, specifically Norfolk Southern, which runs right past the museum. We have been the stewards of the Mohawk for many years, said Elkhart Mayor Rod Robertson in a press release. Although we had no shortage of pride and admiration for this historic machine, we lack the expertise to be able to preserve it in the way it deserves. We are thrilled to be able to announce this partnership and a new life for the Mohawk. According to FWRHS, a mechanical evaluation of the locomotive has been performed by FMW Solutions with financial support from former Norfolk Southern CEO Wick Moorman. The group estimates that it will take more than $4.3 million to restore the locomotive to operation, and FWRHS has issued a $100,000 challenge grant with the goal of raising $500,000 by May 3rd, 2025. Donations can be made online at americanloco.org. FWRHS has also is also encouraging people to join its pledge list. Essentially, that means it's a pledge list that you can join that will not only go towards restoring the 3001, but also other equipment they wish to restore as time goes on. Anyway, rather than manage an unknowable ebb and flow of contributions, we encourage backers to join our pledge list, said FWRHS Executive Director Kelly Lynch. We are planning pledge drives at the outset to meet our first crucial fundraising milestones and to measure the feasibility of fundraising for such a massive project. The effort will not be able to move forward without broad and consistent donor support, which we believe we can forecast from the pledges. As much as this effort may be driven by emotion and history, it has to be driven by data and logic too. The Mohawk was among the pinnacle of steam power on the Central, alongside its famous 464 Hudson and 484 Niagara. The first 484s were delivered to New York Central by the American Locomotive Company, or ALCO, in 1916 as part of an order for 129 Class L1 freight locomotives. The 300 unit L2 class that followed from 1925 to 1930 was updated with larger fuel tenders, larger boilers, feed water heaters, and booster engines. However, it was the L3A class Mohawks that were among the Central's most famous steam locomotives of the modern era, built for both freight and passenger service. In 1940, Alco built 25 dual purpose 484s for the railroad. Designers borrowed heavily from the railroad's most famous class of locomotive, the J3 Hudson. When creating the new L3A, equipped with 69-inch drivers and a modern design that concealed most outside piping and a sunken feed water heater, this class became the face of the New York Central freight and passenger service fleet until the end of steam. While most 484 locomotives were dubbed mountains, the New York Central decided to name theirs after the most scenic river of its main line followed in upstate New York, the Mohawk. The Mohawk is the largest tributary of the oh crap, I forget the name of the river. I apologize. The L3A looks like a passenger engine, Trains editor David P. Morgan once wrote in one of his most famous articles titled The Mohawk That Refused to Abdicate and Other Tales in 1955. After all, from the drop coupler pilot to the third pair of disk drivers, she smacks of Hudson design and a blueprint that resists straight lines and luxuries in smooth contours and subtle, feminine curves. No wonder Central Publicans threw the word mountain out of their dictionary. Aside from the fact that the water level route, never let you forget it, and L3A is the last locomotive on Earth anyone would think of as a mountain engine. She is grace and speed, an aristocrat of multiple track main lines and water troughs that would look as out of place on the Tennessee Pass as a K4 in Miami. While the majority of steam operations on New York Central lines east of Buffalo came to an end in 1953, steam sporadically continued being used across the system until May of 1957, when New York Central 3001 operating until retirement in February 1957. While one other New York Central 484 survives, L2 Class D 2933, at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, 3001 in Elkhart is the only modern Mohawk that remains. After it was retired from service in 1957, it was sold to the Texas and Pacific Railroad to replace a heavily vandalized Ford 210-4 on display at the Texas State Fairgrounds. The New York Central locomotive was modified to look like a Texas and Pacific engine. It also got a new number, dubbed TMP 909. After that, the locomotive changed hands multiple times before ending up on static display in Elkhart. For decades, steam fans have dreamed that an operational restoration would someday come for the locomotive. Of the dozen or so known preserved examples of New York Central steam, None are currently operational. Only two 482 locomotives operated in North America in the preservation era: Frisco 1522 and Canadian National 6060, the latter of which is currently undergoing an operational restoration in Alberta. We treat this collaboration and the acquisition of the 3001 with great excitement and seriousness, Lynch said of the effort to restore the Mohawk. The locomotive's future has been uncertain for decades, but with consistent and demonstrated donor support, we believe it can become a major attraction as part of an authentic and immersive experience that will welcome thousands of people from around the world. My personal thoughts on this locomotive is I have a laundry list of railroads, to put it lightly, that I either am a fan of, or I like, or just in some way, shape, or form I have admiration for. And of all the steam locomotives that survived, I have been wishing with a couple of good friends of mine that maybe, just maybe, if there was a stroke of luck, one of the bigger organizations that had enough capital to do it would restore a locomotive for the New York Central. And when I heard the news on Wednesday that 3001 was being restored, which is a Mohawk, very similar to my favorite New York Central steam engine, the Niagara, which is a 484, to say I was shocked but also extremely happy would be an understatement. So, a huge thank you to Wick Mormon for making this possible, and for the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society for taking the initiative to make this possible. And if you would like to donate to help 3001 be returned to operational order, I will leave a link for the AmericanRailroad.org in the description of this video. Here in this picture, we see 3001 pulling a passenger train. Well, I can't. It looks like a passenger train at Bay City Junction, Detroit, Michigan. And judging by the picture here, I can guess this would be sometime in the 40s. That's just my guess. I don't really know. But anyway, thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please be sure to leave a like down below. If you have a comment, please be sure to leave that in the comment section. I always read my comments in my videos. And until next time, I'll see you all down the line. Have a good one.